Here's an article in the Times, headline, Meet the Young Americans Who Want a Monarchy, but Not King Trump. Millions of protesters took to the streets in fear for the future of the republic. A growing fringe say it's time for an absolute monarchy. So that's the premise here. The rise of monarchism among young Americans is consistent with a number of studies that suggest Gen Z is more suspicious of democracy than previous generations. Fewer than 1% of the over 65 are in favor of the American monarchy, but 27% of 18 to 29-year-olds in the USA would like to have a king or queen, according to a YouGov poll in 2023. That's pretty much the whole story. I mean, it goes on and on, but the claim anyway is that monarchy is becoming more popular in America, especially among young people, especially among young men in particular, they say. And look, I don't know how accurate that premise is. I'm skeptical about the claim that almost 30% of Americans in their 20s want to have a king or queen. I'm pretty skeptical about that. You know, even if some poll said that, I'm still skeptical. Like that's just anecdotally, that's not an argument that I've ever seriously encountered in the wild from a real person. Like, I don't know if I've ever heard someone genuinely say that they would actually like to pursue, an agenda where we end up with a king instead of a president. So, I mean, and yet we're told 30% of young people feel that way. I don't know. But let's accept the premise for now, because I want to make a few points about it. And I certainly, now, when they say that a growing number of young people are skeptical about democracy, that I don't doubt. Now, being skeptical about democracy, having problems with democracy, that's not the same thing as just openly supporting having a monarch. It's not exactly the same. But anyway, so let's just accept the premise. And first of all, a couple things. First of all, none of this has anything to do with Trump. Trump is not a king. He's not acting like a king. The No Kings protest, that's why it's so dumb. He's a duly elected president acting within the bounds of the law. He's actually showing a lot of restraint. If anything, he's showing too much restraint. I think he's done an excellent job, but if I had any criticism, it's all along the lines of he's too restrained, still, in my opinion. But although I understand politically why that is. And as I pointed out many times, Joe Biden, or the Biden regime anyway, acted much more dictatorial than Trump has ever acted or will ever act. So that's the first thing. Now, as to the question, to the extent that any sizable number of Americans want a monarchy, why would they feel that way? Are they all a bunch of evil fascists? Well, no. These are people who have noticed something true about our country, which is that our democratic system is falling apart. Our democratic system is failing. That is true. It just is. Now, it hasn't quite reached the point of not working at all. I mean, in the last presidential election, the Democrat scheme to replace their dementia-riddled candidate with some woman nobody likes obviously failed in that case. You know, if democracy didn't work at all, then that scheme would have worked. In fact, if democracy didn't work at all, if we were at that point, then Joe Biden would have just he would have gotten a second term as a vegetable. Because that was their first plan, as we know. That's what they actually wanted to have happen. But democracy asserted itself and worked the way it was supposed to. And this is the problem with monarchy, by the way. If we had a monarchy, then Joe Biden would have remained the king as long as he is, even after his mind was gone, he would have been king, and he would have been succeeded by, Hunter Biden? That's the thing about a monarchy. It may seem like an appealing idea to some people until you get a bad monarch. At least with a bad president, you can get rid of him in 4 years, in theory anyway. So all that to say, our democratic system worked in 2024. And I'm not saying that just because the guy I supported won. Okay, I'm not saying, well, a Democrat system works when the guy I like wins and doesn't work when he loses. I say it worked because the Democrats tried to rig the game, which as usual, but they failed. But in general, our democracy is starting to break apart. It's not a straight line down, but it's trending down. There's peaks and valleys, but it's trending down. How do we know that? Well, they're about to make a foreign socialist from Uganda the mayor of New York. Look at some of the people we have in Congress, people who are open about their allegiances to foreign countries. Ilhan Omar openly talks about how Somalia is her real priority. People who are so incredibly stupid and incompetent that they aren't qualified to be shift manager at Domino's Pizza, much less members of Congress. There's a chance that a Somali scammer will be the next mayor of Minneapolis. I mean, the list goes on. This is what our democracy is getting us now. It's a government increasingly run by foreign agents, scam artists, and semi-literate retards. And so that's what democracy is getting us. What's happening is people are looking at that. They're looking at all this. They're looking at Congress. They're looking at these congressional hearings, arguments that very much resemble arguments that you might find in a Waffle House or on a Spirit Airlines flight, but should not be happening in the halls of Congress. They're looking at that sort of thing, and they're saying, this democracy thing, not all it's cracked up to be. They're noticing the fact that our democracy has empowered the dumbest, most incompetent people who don't even like our country and aren't loyal to it, to seize positions of power. People are noticing that, and they should notice it, and they're right. But I think they're wrong about the solution. We don't need a monarch, and there's no way to get to there from here anyway. Even if we could, the monarch would come from this, we should have a monarch. Who? Who's that guy going to be? And who's going to select that person? Well, the monarch would come from the system. It'd be chosen by the system, and the system is fundamentally left-wing. So we'd end up with a left-wing monarch. And also, of course, our country was founded by people who rebelled against monarchy. So a monarchy in America would be the end of America it'd be the end of the America that our founders created, which is to say it'd be the end of America. And I don't want that because I love America. I don't want to give up on it. History, economics, literature, the Constitution. Did you actually study these in school? Probably not. Or you got some watered down version that missed the point entirely. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truth about the world, our country, and our place in it. That's why I want to share something I think that you'd find valuable. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses that cover everything from C.S. Lewis and Genesis to the Roman Republic and early Christian history. I've been really enjoying their Constitution 101 course, which dives deep into the design and purpose of our Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined over the past century by progressive and liberal ideologies. The course is completely self-paced with 12 lectures, so you can start whenever you want and finish whenever you want. Honestly, I believe our country desperately needs more Americans who truly understand the Constitution and can stand up for our freedoms against an increasingly large and unaccountable government. If you care about preserving what makes America great, I encourage you to check out this free Constitution 101 course. It's a great eye-opener to how much we've drifted from our founding principles. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/Walsh to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/Walsh to enroll for free. hillsdale.edu/Walsh. And none of this is necessary anyway. It's not possible. I mean, that's the other thing. That's maybe the main thing. It's like, even if you think that, we should have a monarchy, I disagree, but it's like, that can't happen. Okay. But on top of all that, it's not necessary. The problem, all of the issues you're noticing with our democratic system as it is currently run, those issues are true and they are real and they're a big problem. Okay, when you just have like hordes of idiots who don't even love this country getting to decide what happens, it's a catastrophe. You just can't have a functioning country that way. It cannot work. Nothing works that way. No system at all works when you just say to everybody in the system with no qualification, okay, everybody gets an equal say about what we're going to do. There is no system, no organization, nothing that works if you do it that way. And a country doesn't work that way either. But we don't need to abolish our entire Constitution and our entire system of government. We don't need to abolish what our founders set up, and we shouldn't. We need to restore it. We need to go back to what they had in mind, and they never had in mind to give literally every person who happens to be living inside our borders a vote. That was never the idea. The founders didn't want to do that because the founders were not morons. Why is our system falling apart? Well, because we give the vote to foreigners who have no stake in our country and no love for it. We give the vote to welfare queens who don't contribute to society in any way whatsoever. We give the vote to people with 70 IQs who have no idea what planet they're even living on. We give the vote to the dumbest and most useless people. We give the vote to people who think that, like, The Handmaid's Tale is a great prophetic work of literature. We give the vote to anybody with a pulse. And we even give the vote to people who don't have a pulse. So that's the problem, right? And it's true, again, that the system does not work that way. If you insist on that, then your country is going to fall apart. And I mean, if you're definitely better off living under a wise and just monarch than in a democracy governed by a mob of the dumbest, most clueless idiots the world has ever seen. Between those two choices, you're better with the former. But that doesn't have to be the choice. And besides, the wise and just qualifier is like really important there. And there's no guarantees about that. So the better solution is to fix our current system. And you can do that in ways that I've described many times. It can be done. Now, do I think it will be done? No, I have no faith in that, but it can be. Unlike, transitioning from our current system to having a monarchy, having a king and a palace, which cannot happen, fixing the voting system can, in theory, happen. And again, I've talked in many ways about how to do that. Drastically narrow the qualifications to vote. That's it. I'm not saying that would create a utopia. I'm not saying that would solve all of our problems. It would solve a lot of our problems. I mean, if there's one thing we could do all by itself that would be nearly guaranteed to make America great again, it would be that. Because right now, the idea is that every human existing within our borders is automatically qualified to vote, as long as they're over the age of 18. And that's going to come down to anyway. So, and that's total madness. It was never supposed to be that way. None of the founders of our democratic system, going all the way back to our founders, going back further to the ancient Greeks. I mean, none of them recommended the kind of system we have now. In fact, they all warned against it. They all said, well, obviously, look, people should have a say, but obviously you can't just have an unruly mob of any old moron with no stake in anything deciding what happens in your country. Like, obviously you can't give them an equal say. And we got all those warnings over the millennia. And we said, yeah, but you know what? I think we'll do exactly that. Fortunately, it's an easy fix. Not a likely fix, but it is easy. It could happen. We could transform our country overnight with a few tweaks. You just got to disenfranchise a few groups. And I've gone over the list before. Disenfranchise, take the vote away from anybody on welfare, number one. If you're living off of taxpayer money, you shouldn't get to vote. Now, the good news is if you get back on your own 2 feet and you're living on your own and not living off of the dole, you could then earn the right to vote at that point. But while you're living on the dole, you should know. The vote should go to people who are able to support themselves and contribute to society. And you might have reasons why you're not able to do that, but even so, we can be sympathetic to that. But that means that you don't get to be a captain of the ship here. You don't get to steer the ship. You don't get to vote to give yourself more of my money. You're not putting any money into the system and you get to vote to decide what happens with it? No, clearly that we should not allow that. Next, I would disenfranchise anyone who can't pass a 10-question fifth grade civics exam. Every time I say that, people are like, well, how could you? That's impossible to. You could very easily do that. Very easily. It's a low bar. It's a very generous bar. You could argue for a much higher bar than that, but I think that would be good enough. And how do you do it? Well, when you register to vote, require registration in person somewhere, like at the DMV or whatever. And you should be given a quick exam on paper, no Googling, no chat GPT allowed. And if you can't get at least 7 of the 10 correct, then you don't get to vote. And it would be questions really easy, like name the branches of government. I mean, not even 5th grade. Like, it's lower than that. And anyone who can't do that shouldn't be allowed to vote. Right? They're not fit. They're not suited. Why should you be allowed to vote in a system that you don't even understand? You don't know what you're doing. Right? It's no different than a driver's exam, which we also administer at the DMV. The basic idea is, well, we're not going to let you drive unless you demonstrate that you know how to do it. And we're not going to let you have a say over our system if you can't demonstrate that you know anything about it in the first place. What we do now, it's like the equivalent of letting someone drive, giving them a driver's license when they don't even know which pedal is the brake pedal. Okay. They don't even know what a steering wheel is. It's like if someone shows up and you're trying to teach them to drive, you say, okay, put your hands on the steering wheel. And they go, which one is that? And then you say, oh, good enough. Here's your driver's license. Be on your way. We have the equivalent of that. We have these people just wandering in like, what is this? What are we doing here? You're voting. You're going to vote for president. Who's that? Which one's the president again? Is he which one? So we can't do that. And then I would also disenfranchise dual citizens. You renounce your citizenship to any other country before you can vote in our elections. Again, this is like really reasonable stuff. I mean, this is very reasonable. And in general, I would make the voting qualifications even higher for legal citizens who were not born in this country, first-generation immigrants. I wouldn't disenfranchise them all, but I want the best of the best voting in our elections to come here and start voting. Like, to come here and be allowed to be a citizen in the first place, I think the bar should be very high. To then be able to contribute, to actually be able to, like, again, steer the ship, I think it's an even higher bar. And, now I say this as someone who wants a moratorium on all immigration to begin with, but to the extent that we have any immigrants coming in, I would raise the bar even higher before they're allowed to vote. But the one qualification there, just again, like lowest, really low bar is just you must renounce any citizenship to any other country. You only are a citizen of ours. And if you are not willing to do that, then you shouldn't get a say. Then voting is not for you. Then at that point, if you want to live in this country, then it is a privilege that we are allowing you to live here. But we will decide what happens here, not you. And that's it. I mean, what is that? 4 or 5 qualifications, really? Basic level stuff, nothing. It's basically requiring the bare possible minimum of voters. And the idea that we shouldn't even require the bare minimum is, to me, like total lunacy. And yet, here we are. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.